Hello. In this video, I'm going to recreate 3 of the greatest synth sounds in synth history on the sequel to the best-selling synth of all time. And I think this video will be useful if you're interested in a MicroKorg and you just want to see how you program sounds on it. And what's our first sound? Bit of a clue for you there. This first sound is going to be the bass line to ROYGBIV by Boards of Canada. From 1998's Music Has the Right to Children, this is the quintessential warm analog bass line. So let's see if this digital synth can do it, or at least a reasonable approximation. It's a really simple sound, but man, I have literally spent 4 solid hours just trying to coax the exact right settings, because it really goes to show that a well-crafted sound is so specific. Just the slightest deviation, and it isn't quite the same. But anyway, that's sort of the point of this video. It's not about getting exactly the same thing, but just showing you how you would do it on this machine. To initialize a patch, I push this button here that says home, and then this little display says now init on this left button. Init. Yes, it is. And then we execute the init. We can stop there. Okay, let's go a bit further, shall we? And so the way that you program the MicroKorg in principle, you've got all of the sections of the voice over here on the right. And there are these 5 knobs, and they do different things on these different pages. And it's quite nice. We've got this screen with these cute little graphics on it. So it's very clear what the knobs are meant to be in any of these little screens. We do actually have 2 timbres that we can play with, but I don't think I'm going to bother with that today. Far too complicated for me. Now, I've seen other sort of patch breakdowns of this sound that use a saw waveform blended in with a square waveform, but I don't think that's actually how the sound was made. I think the people who are doing that are trying to ape an aspect of the sound that can be added with a MicroKorg as well in a different way. So to make this sound, I want a main oscillator and a sub-oscillator underneath it. Both of them want to be square waves. The pulse width wants to be slightly modulated, as does the pitch, I think. But on an SH101, when you modulate the pulse width of the primary oscillator, the sub does not modulate, nor does it waver in pitch. An important detail. So the first thing we need to do is make this monophonic, because it will help us play it. And if I come into the voice section, this is where we can control things about how the synth is voiced. And one of these things is the ability to turn it from poly to mono. And because on this little screen, it's the blue second along dial that I see referenced, then I need to touch the blue second along dial in this row. So that's just showing you that, hey, that's what these 5 things are doing right now. So you turn it to mono. Happy days. The next thing on the list is the oscillators. We push this. Now this is showing us these are what the 5 knobs are doing on this page for oscillator 1. Now there are multiple pages, and we see them by pushing this little button repeatedly. And this at the top is showing us there's a list of 4 options that we're actually cycling through. They're shown on the screen here, and they're shown on the screen here, on the silk screen here. And so oscillator 1, 2, 3, and noise. We're going to need 2 oscillators. So let's go to the first one, and let's change its waveform from saw, which sounds like that, to square, which sounds like that. Now, square has an important shape parameter, and what the shape parameter does in the square is vary its width. Now, we can actually see that. There is in here. Where is it? Oh, no, it's here. Look, scope. If we push scope, now we actually see a little scope on the screen, which is nice, isn't it? So we'll look at that while we mess with this. Nice. Now, I actually discovered that you need a very thin square wave. Part of the sound is the thinness of the tone. It totally changes the tone whilst keeping the pitch at the same pitch. And there is a fine-tune control, We could have a smidge of fine-tune change, and that's going to mean that when we blend in the sub-oscillator, they'll be slightly out and create this sort of beating effect, which I don't actually think is really in the tune, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Now, the next thing is oscillator 2, but I can't hear it right now. To hear it, I need to move one ahead to the mixer, where we see that oscillator 1 has a level of 127, that's full volume, but oscillator 2 is 0. Now we blend in oscillator 2. And let's come back to this screen, push it once more, and now we're seeing oscillator 2. Because you remember, we have to push this multiple times to pass through the screen, to sort of move through the 4 sections of this screen. So if we stop here, we are seeing what we can do with oscillator 2. We also want it to be a square wave, and we want it to be, I think, about 32. But it's supposed to be a sub-octave generator, and that's 1 octave below. We can see that we have a semitone shift, and 1 octave is minus 12. We're in the wrong register. Oh, there we go. Yeah, and if we adjust this fine tune just a smidge, you get this beating effect, which is really typical of analog synths. If you want to create the sound of an analog synth, the sort of instability, you just come into fine tuning. You have it so the oscillators just kind of, they move against each other in a pleasing way. In fact, it's kind of a chorusing sound, which is going to be important later. Let's come into the mixer and check the levels. I think we can have a bit more of this. Yes. And a bit less oscillator 1. And let's have a tiny smidge of noise. Just a hair. Noise will create that kind of dusty sound. Everyone likes that. And then to the filter, which is actually in this same page. So let's push this once more. Now we see it. There are different filter types, but LP4, that is the 4-pole, aka 24 dB, is the style of filter that you would have on the sort of synth that this would have been made on, I think. So let's reduce the cutoff. And this muffles it down. And let's increase the drive. That's nice. The drive adds drive. The next thing are the envelopes. The envelopes shape the sound over time, and there are 2. Let's look at the amplifier one that controls the volume. This is how we can make the sound go from short to long, or have a long attack. Yeah, we ain't got time for that. And let's do this. Mostly the sound just kind of purrs and stays at the same level, but there is a little chiff, and that's coming from the filter envelope. So let's increase the decay time, but we're not actually hearing that sound because we need to apply it. And we're going to apply that in the patch section in a second, but let's create an LFO. An LFO is a slow control wave, and I want an LFO that moves kind of slowly. This will be fine. There's nothing on this screen that shows us that speed that's going, and 27 doesn't really mean anything to me. But you'll hear the sound of the LFO as you apply it. You can then return back to this screen to change the frequency, the rate it goes. So now we're on the patch screen. And these are 6 patches, that is sort of virtual connections that you can make inside the synth. And you can send the LFOs to control various things on this screen. And you can also make it so that the mod wheel gets in the way and other things like velocity get in the way. So depending on how hard you play the keys or how much something is sent around the synth. It's good stuff. But we're going to do something very basic here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that LFO that we made in this previous screen, this number 27 wobble, and I'm going to send it to control the width that we were playing with before, the PWM. And so I want the source to be LFO1, and I want the destination to be oscillator 1 shape, because that's the name of the shape control, that blue one that we were messing with, which if you use a square wave is PWM. At the moment, the blue source 2 is selected, and that means that the mod wheel has to be up for this sound to happen. But I can turn that all the way down and remove that so that this happens all the time. There's one final thing, two actually. You have to make sure that you have some intensity, either positive or negative intensity. That's so that you actually send the LFO in to do something. And you have to turn connect to on. Let's do another one. I'll push this again to go on to patch page 2. And let's do the same thing, the same LFO 1. And by the way, I'm going to choose the plus and minus one because I want it to move it both positively and then negatively by an equal amount, which will create vibrato. And I'm going to ascend it to the oscillator 1's pitch because I want it to control pitch. I've got to turn connect on and I've got to turn intensity to a sensible level. Because if you don't, that happens. Yeah. The third patch is I want a tiny smidge of envelope. I'm going to use the filter EG, filter envelope, one of the two, and I'm going to send it to filter cutoff by a very small amount. 7 will probably do. Oh, turn the connect on, like that. Yeah. We're getting close, but there's a huge component of the sound in the record that is not represented here, and that's effects. Effects make synth sounds. One of the major effects on here is a chorusing, and we can create that in the mod section. Down here, you've got mod, delay, and reverb. That's modulation effects, delay, and reverb. If we hold on and off and push the mod button, it enables that section, and then we can choose different effects. There are 2 pages here as well. This is the page where we choose the effect and we can dial in some parameters. I'm going to have chorus with a very slow speed and a low depth. And a minor amount of it. Oh. Now the sound is kind of stereo. Let's come in here and just, I might turn this to... want to re-trigger. So every time I push a key, even if I have one held down, then it will re-trigger and create that pyo sound, which is what we want. Even though I actually don't think it's as accurate to the record, it just sort of feels right. The final thing you can do is EQ the sound, that is change the low and high sort of balance. And if anything, I'd take some of the low end out, because actually it's not as bassy as you might think. I think we're pretty much there. Now let's go for a copyright strike. The sound is not right. It's not exactly what is on the record, but that isn't really the point. It's just to show that this synth can sound very warm and fulsome and joyous if you program it to be. It's also an example of just how beautiful and elegant synths can be when really expertly programmed and played. I don't mean by me just then. I mean by Boards of Canada, somewhere around 1997. What's next? So the next sound is the Vox Humana string sound that Gary Numan so famously used on Cars. I honestly can't state how wonderful this sound is. And also, again, like the ROYGBIV sound, it's just really, really simple. Yet a simple thing just so. Man, that record is so good. Icy, icy cool. So let's have a go at making it. Basically, it's actually similar in many respects to ROYGBIV. It's just two things playing against each other, and it's all just in the fine details of the extent to which you sort of tune these subtle little aspects of it. Traditionally, I think it is generally made with 3 LFO synths. We only have 2 here, but we can still make the sound. And the idea of the sound is that you have a saw and a square wave, and the saw is being pitch modulated to make it go whoa, 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 whoa. And the square wave is 2 at a different rate. But the square wave is also having its pulse width modulated, as we were doing a little bit before. And so there are 3 different rates. And you can see that the synth designers who are making the Polymoog were just thinking, how can we make these 2 simple elements sound as rich and modulated as possible, or modulate them 3 different ways? This is our init sound. And so the first sound that we need is a saw wave, which I think is what we've got. It is what we've got. But we need to make it wobble. So we do this by applying an LFO in the patch. So let's come to P1 and let's send LFO1. We want it to go to oscillator 1 pitch, like that. And let's turn this source 2 off because we don't want the mod wheel to control how much it happens. We just want it on all the time. And we choose the intensity. I think that's what Gary would have wanted. It's actually quite intense. So the second thing is we want a square wave in oscillator 2. So let's turn it from saw to square. Like that, mate. We want to adjust the shape about here. Again, quite thin, actually. And then let's come to the mixer and turn up oscillator 2's level. And then we need to come into the patch again, because now we need to modulate the pulse width. And we're looking at patch 2, and it's actually defaulted to LFO2 as its source, which is what we want. And let's change it to oscillator 2's shape, because shape's the name of pulse width modulation. Oh, and let's connect it. And then let's come in here and we'll adjust the rate of oscillator 2. So let's just listen to these things in isolation. So that's oscillator 2 with its modulated pulse width modulation. And we can come in here and we can choose the amount. There's a kind of happy place with that. It's about there. But we also need to modulate its pitch too, because we would be doing that with the third LFO. Alas, we don't have one. But we can, with these patches, send one LFO to 2 places. Well, more in fact. But let's send LFO 1, which is on pitch duties, plus and minus LFO 1. We'll send it to oscillator 2's pitch. Plus and minus, by the way, because I want it to be centered on the oscillator to not make it always go up and out of tune. Oh, and let's connect it. And then let's come back into the mixer. Now, the thing that we are so missing is the amplitude. That needs to be increased so we get a slow start and a long release. Now let's come into these and dial in these ranges. There's an amount by which you make them kind of detune against each other in a really pleasing way. There's a bit more complexity in the actual sound that we've not quite got, whether it's exactly right. But does it have the vibe? Yeah. It's understatedly awesome, that sound is, and its application, the melody, the riff, it's so icy, understated and cool. I can't stress enough how badass it is. Just synths being used to great effect. You could add some delay, you know? I don't think that would hurt at all. That's adding a bit of sort of stereo width. It's all about this kind of soaring, sort of ethereal, just transcendentness floating above you like an angel has come into the room. Synths. They are sometimes the only instrument for the job. Thanks, Gary. Finally, another absolutely icy cold tune. This would be Mr. Fingers and Can You Feel It? Larry heard in 1986 with a Juno, I believe, Juno 60. Just making one of the most amazing records, you know, no biggie, and super simple, like all the things we've been looking at. The bass line is this. And that is a square wave with a shape of 24. And we're modulating this square wave with a little bit of LFO1. I may be doing it a bit more than it is on the actual record. It just sounds great all by itself. What I'd like to do is record this and then try and come up with the strings for it, which just, it's just heartbreaking. And there is a loop recorder on the MicroKorg, and this actually lets us layer things. So let's hit record, and I'll just play this in. It will actually capture the audio. Like that. Now let's work out the strings, and we'll add them on top. And these sort of strings, which I believe are the Juno again, are therefore just very simple. They're one oscillator with a sawtooth, another with a square, that's the sub-oscillator, down 12 semitones, mixed together in the mixer, just like we did with the ROYGBIV sound, and then filtered down. And in the case of a Juno sound, it kind of needs the modulation, the chorus. So nice. Yet another example of just exquisitely simple music made with synthesizers that's just so incredibly on point. And I'm indebted to fellow YouTuber Gayu Beats, who did a brilliant recreation of Can You Feel It, which I'll link below. And I think from there that the notes are this. Bass. You can do a lot with a synthesizer. There are so many places you can take it. So many of these songs are just simplicity themselves, just a few really well-chosen elements, sequenced exquisitely, far better than I can. And that makes recreating them really hard, because they're very specific. You've got to get exactly the right settings. But what I hope that this shows is that you can absolutely make music with something like the MicroKorg. And heavens above, a lot of people have. The previous MicroKorg is the best-selling synth of all time. And so what, I wonder, could people cook up with this? Thanks, Korg, for having me do this. And thank you for watching. Go make some music. Thanks.